Ever made a decision that seemed small but ended up changing everything? Well, Great Britain decided to separate itself from the European Union, and the debate prompted worldwide considerations of the real benefits that the European Union actually provides for its members. I really do not know what will happen to Britain as it moves forward on a different path than its European counterparts, but is the European Union really worth it? Back in 1957, a group of 6 countries, Belgium, France, Italy, Germany, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, got together and formed something called the European Economic Community, or EEC. They wanted to boost trade and bring stability after World War II. As time went on, more countries joined the club. In 1987, they passed the Single European Act, which got rid of trade barriers and let the EEC have more say in things like the environment and health. Then, in 1993, they sealed the deal with the Treaty of Maastricht. This created the single market, where goods, services, people, and money could move freely among member nations. They even introduced a common currency called the euro. This wasn't just about trade. The treaty made everyone from member nations an EU citizen, making it easier for people to move around Europe. All these changes helped create a more connected and proud Europe, shifting away from the nationalism that caused problems before World War II. Cool, right? The European Union has been pretty successful in getting its members countries to work together. They have lots of meetings where leaders discuss and agree on policies. In 2017 alone, there were 92 days of meetings for ministers and 3,000 working party meetings. These meetings are essential for countries to share experiences and decide on joint responses. However, the EU can only make decisions if it has the authority and if member countries agree. But here's the thing. The EU hasn't been as successful in bringing European people closer together. Even though citizens know more about the EU now, they also criticize and question it more. One big challenge is that the EU setup, as outlined in the treaty, doesn't always match what citizens want. Some people wish the EU would focus more on social policies alongside economic matters. The EU is working on making citizens feel more connected, but there's still a gap. Many folks see the EU as just a bunch of institutions, not realizing that it's made up of member states, and most importantly, the citizens themselves. The European Union has made trading between European countries much easier. They've created an economic union where goods and services can be traded without extra charges, making the market work more efficiently and encouraging healthy competition among companies. Traveling around Europe is a breeze too. Citizens can go anywhere within the EU without any fuss. This is a big change from 30 years ago, when Western European countries were dealing with challenges from communist regimes. With this new unified Europe, conflict has been at an all-time low for many years. In fact, the Europa.eu claims that Europe has experienced 70 years of lasting peace. The EU has been a force for a lot of good in the world, but not everyone is thrilled. Some, like the British, felt that joining the EU meant giving up a bit of their independence. Members have to get approval from the EU for certain decisions, and breaking EU laws comes with penalties from the higher governing power. Joining a big group like the EU means every member gets affected by things happening outside their own borders. For example, if there's a market crash in Germany, it can make the euro less valuable. This, in turn, affects countries like Italy and France that use the euro. Speaking of the euro, adding new countries and adopting the euro caused more political and economic problems, leading to social unrest. In Greece, unemployment and economic issues have fueled far-right movements. Italy faces similar challenges, with rising discrimination and anti-immigrant feelings. This trend is also seen in Germany and France. These problems are linked to colonial actions and recent EU policies towards neighboring regions, especially Africa. The EU's response to the migrant crisis has expanded borders beyond the Mediterranean, restricting many Africans in their own countries due to the EU's stance on economic migration. The EU Emergency Trust Fund for Africa aims to address migration's root causes, but focuses on tightening borders outside the EU, offering funds to select African countries. While young people risk dangerous routes to Europe, sustainable economic and educational measures are lacking in Central and West Africa. Looking ahead, the EU must make sustainable changes. French President Emmanuel Macron suggests 3 circles for the EU's future: treaties with superpowers, current membership focusing on freedom of movement and research, and a core Eurozone with integrated labor markets. Now, being an EU citizen means you can travel freely across all EU countries without needing a passport. This was a big reason why Great Britain left the EU. They wanted more control over their borders, worried about immigrants from France, and concerned about terrorism. When a country joins the EU, it gives up some control over things that might not actually affect them. A good example is the Greek debt crisis. From 2010 onwards, Greece struggled to pay its debts, asking for more time and enacting bank holidays to calm worried citizens. This crisis strongly devalued the euro, hurting other countries like France, Germany, and Italy. It made people question Greece's place in the EU and the EU's overall purpose. It shows how one country's issues can shock the entire EU. Even though each country has a say and can vote in the European Parliament, the final decisions, whether they agree or not, are made by the Parliament. This is a particular concern for smaller nations like Luxembourg, Estonia, and Malta, each with fewer than 7 members of the European Parliament, or MEPs. These nations have minimal voting power, and unlike the United States, there isn't a second legislative body, like the Senate, to balance this representation gap. This lack of representation poses significant challenges for these smaller, self-sufficient European nations. Various international organizations, such as the United Nations, NATO, or the International Monetary Fund, also limit a country's control over its own policies. However, the distinctive feature of the European Union is the extensive control it holds over its member nations. Despite contributing to Europe's economic growth, a crisis in one country can reverse years of progress for all European nations. Perhaps Britain's decision to leave the EU, despite facing backlash, was a strategic move considering these factors, right? Anyway, how do you think the decisions made by the EU might affect your daily life? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more intriguing insights. Until next time, stay curious.